Alright, YouTube, we are back with some more FF7 content. We have some more interviews with Hamaguchi. A lot more. There's at least 5 that I've pulled up. I don't know all the things that are in them. I've seen like snippets from them as usual. People post on Twitter and stuff. Hamaguchi once again talking about wanting to show part 3 soon, whatever that might be. But the main thing from that for me is that it wasn't just like a one-off thing. He just threw in some random interview. This is a completely different interview where he says that again. So it depends on what soon means, obviously, but they're definitely kind of maybe slowly getting to the marketing for Part 3. Probably Game Awards, but we'll see. I also have him talking about the remake project and that it's essentially a reimagining of the original FF7, which goes against the whole sequel discussion theory that we always kind of talk about, but they've been saying that for a long time, but whatever. He also touches on the fan feedback and how that doesn't necessarily affect like the game, the story, maybe like the gameplay, obviously. But like it's not fan feedback that's like dictating what's happening in the games in terms of the story. So we'll start with the Ntower interview. Square Enix revealed a short while ago that the remake trilogy, so all the games you just talked about, will be released on Nintendo Switch 2 and Xbox devices. And now without revealing any spoilers for the third part of the game, but what guiding principles led to the development of the design of the third part of the remake story? Can you say anything about the third game? So like I said, there's not a huge amount. I can't make any specific announcements about the third game in the series today. It's not the time. We're not ready for that yet. But I can talk about it in a fairly abstract terms of how we're approaching it. As you're very much aware, the first game in the series, Final Fantasy VII Remake, was a more story-driven linear gaming experience, and then that evolved and changed into a more open-world adventure for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second game, and that seems to be very well regarded. People seem to like that change a lot, and they like the new gameplay direction, so we're very happy with that. But moving forward to the third game in the series, obviously I can't say exactly what it is, but I don't want to deliver just exactly the same style of gameplay experience as we had with Rebirth again. We're going to evolve it and change it again to give another different and fresh take on the Final Fantasy VII gameplay. Again, that will be revealed in the not-too-distant future. I can say we're working on it and we're trying to change that because we've actually got to build up and running in development team right now where you can experience that new style of gameplay. Some of that's pretty interesting, right? And some of it we've heard before, the not-too-distant future thing. Obviously, that is very interesting, but we just don't know when that's going to be. Again, probably the Game Awards. But they could surprise us. There's still a few months till the Game Awards, so who knows exactly. Changing up the gameplay from Rebirth is what I'm very much interested in because we can't do the same thing again, right? With the first game is obviously quite linear. Second game, we get these kind of pseudo open world mechanics with world intel and activating towers and fog of war, all that shit, marking POIs, right? You can't just do that again because with the third game, we're going to be able to go back to the previous regions, but also the ones we've yet to be to, right? Like Wutai and where Medeal is and shit. Like, we're going to have those new regions, which is exciting, but we're going to be able to go back to the Grasslands or Junon, and, like, what are we doing there? We can't just be activating fucking towers again. There's got to be something new to do. Also, like, brand new side quests in those regions and shit, right? So that's what I'm very much interested in, is what is the new gameplay elements outside of the Highwind, because obviously the Highwind's going to have its own mechanics and maybe all kinds of different things you can do with the Highwind, whatever that might be. We've been kind of teased that before in the past, right? But what are we doing in regions that we've already been to in Rebirth? When it comes to changing up the gameplay in the third game, they're going to change the combat, right? They're going to elevate the combat in some way. We don't know exactly yet. Maybe more synergy attack stuff. We've talked about trio synergy attacks for the last couple of years at this point, right? So maybe something like that. Synergy limit breaks. I've been pushing that narrative for a long fucking time. I want that. There will just be more new stuff to the combat in general just because we'll have Sid and Vincent. And we don't know how they're going to play it. Especially Vincent. That's the interesting one. There could be some cool shit with Sid too, but with Vincent's ability to change into monsters, if they incorporate that into the third game, like there could be some really good shit if he has different kinds of weapons. We did a whole video talking about Vincent's combat in the next game, right? Where maybe he has different guns that perform differently, which is how it was in the original game. There's at least different kinds of guns. Like a machine gun doesn't shoot the same as a shotgun. They should perform very, very differently. So there could be some really cool shit with Vincent, maybe. It's all looking good. It's going in the right direction. The development is going very well. And I said, unfortunately, I'd love to be able to tell you about it, but I can't do that today. In the near future, we'll be able to announce it to everyone, and it really will be a fitting climax to the Final Fantasy VII Remake series. So hopefully you can look forward to seeing that information come soon. But in the meantime, I invite everyone to play Switch 2, Xbox, whatever. Anyways. So yeah, in that one kind of little paragraph there, he mentions it twice again. So 3 times just in the first 2 paragraphs that we've read here about like soon, near future for Part 3 stuff. So they're definitely doing something, I think, this year for sure. How much community feedback did you implement in the development of the third part? Because, of course, the first part and the second part are very different from each other. How much do you implement community feedback, and how do you work with that? Yes, I think that is an important aspect. We do listen to a lot of feedback. Obviously, it is very important to us. Certainly, one thing our producer, Yoshinori Kitase, has said it's an advantage of this series that we can look at the results partway through because it's a trilogy of 3 games, and one of them will go out into the world, and they'll get a response to that, and then we can look at that and reflect that in the later game. That is definitely a part of it. That is very important. It's a great opportunity to be able to do that as well. But I think one thing is very important when you look at that feedback and opinions from players is what I want to avoid is having that adapt and change the core experience of the game. I think that core theme, that core base, that creative vision that you have has to come from the creative team. In our case, that's obviously Mr. Nomura, Mr. Nazuma, Mr. Katase, and myself as well. We have to really get that solid idea of what game we want, what experience we want to create down. So really quickly, it says Mr. Nazuma, which was confusing to me because I've never heard of that name when it comes to Square Enix or FF7 Remake. I think it's meant to be Nojima. This is a German article, website, whatever. It's not auto-translated, though. This is just the article in English, but I think they got a few things wrong here and there like that, because Nozuma's obviously nobody. But yeah, anyways, they're not letting like fan feedback dictate the core of the story, the theme of the games and stuff like that, which is great. I will say, I don't necessarily disagree with him or think that he's like lying about that or whatever. I will say that we talked about it before on the channel, like the ending of Remake and what they're setting up with Remake, and then what we got in Rebirth, I felt like they dialed back on the Whisper shit, the Fate stuff, the Destiny shit. Like, it definitely feels to me like there was some level of fan feedback that dictated how they handled aspects of the story in the second game. I could be wrong on that. Maybe that was always the plan, but we had this really crazy shit happen in the first game, and you don't get much of that, so to speak, in the second game. There is obviously still crazy shit with like the multiple world stuff, the Zack shit, what's happening there, the different stamp worlds, right? There's interesting shit. There's new shit. They didn't just get rid of it entirely, but it just felt like they dialed back a lot on it for me. Regardless of all that, my hope is that they are doing the story they want to do, and fan feedback isn't changing that. Like, they've had a through line from day one of what they want to do through the games. However many games there was going to be, they have an idea of that, right? And I hope that like fan feedback isn't changing what their vision was. That is not affected by the fan feedback at all. That really is our decision, our creative vision. But then you have to look at other aspects of the game where it is important to look at fan feedback, and certainly in terms of gameplay experience itself, things like, we got a lot of feedback for the minigames. For example, I really like this minigame, or I thought this one was maybe should have been done differently. The difficulty level is another thing that we really have to pay attention to and try and place it where we want. Those kinds of areas of feedback and the nitty-gritty of the game, the small details, are very important. We try to be proactive about reflecting feedback for that. Certainly our awareness, the way we look at this, and what we're aiming for is to make sure that the second game in the series is better than the first one. It's a better experience overall. The third game, again, should be a better experience because we've learned and we know what people want and they like. So it's very interesting doing a series like this. And obviously it's a little bit unique because we're releasing 3 standalone package games. But in a lot of ways, because it's an ongoing series of direct sequels, it's a lot like doing a service model game in some ways, although not exactly the same. So it's quite a unique balance there in terms of how we have to deal with feedback. And I'm very honored to be able to do it in this way because it's a unique experience that not many developers get. So yeah, feedback on gameplay stuff is more so what they seem to be using when it comes to developing the games. Now, difficulty stuff. Minigames, I definitely want to see them dial it back a bit. Some of the minigames in Rebirth were atrocious to complete, and you had to do that if you want to get the platinum, right? You had to play literally every fucking side content minigame, whatever, right? And some of them were difficult. Like the 3D brawler, like without the pause trick where you can see what move like the enemy is setting up or what angle they're punching from. Like without the pause trick, I don't know how you could do that shit. I don't know how you have enough time. You have to have like insane reaction time. And like the piano minigame I struggled with the first time I played through the game. And like the Choco to Glide or whatever it is with Yuffie and like Cosmo Canyon, like that was another hard one for me. But once I finished playing through Rebirth the first time, took like a little bit of a break from it and then came back to it to complete the platinum. Some of the minigames weren't bad. Like it's almost like stepping away from the game helped me because like I hopped right into the piano minigame and I went through almost all of them on the first try, despite having never practiced the minigame at all. And for some reason with that second playthrough, like the Choco to Glide minigame just clicked for me, where the first playthrough, it just, I don't know what it was, I just couldn't figure it out, or I just wasn't understanding the mechanics of it or something, but hopping right into it again, with pretty much zero practice, I was just nailing most of the tracks, and there's like a few here and there where I had to like look up guides. I bring that up to say that while there are challenging minigames in Rebirth, and I was definitely somebody that was actively complaining about them, like, they also were pretty easy once I actually, like, committed to them. And even, like, the sit-up minigame with, like, you know, Tifa in the gym, like, I hate that shit. I absolutely hated it in Remake. I hated it in Rebirth. When I was doing my first playthrough, I tried it one time. When you first get to the gym, I was like, oh, God, here we go, another workout minigame. And I attempted it against the first person, I think it's, like, a woman, that wants to do sit-ups against Tifa. And I did horrible. Way worse than I ever did the minigame in fucking Remake. And I was like, I'm never doing this shit again. But, again, on that second playthrough, when I hopped into it, I think I beat her on, like, the first or second try, and then, like, the next 2 or 3 dudes, or whatever it is, I did them in a reasonable amount of time, and then it was Jules that I was stuck on for kind of a long time, but I did eventually get it. Within, like, I don't think it took me an hour to actually complete the Jules one, to be honest. So there definitely is an argument to be made to make some of the minigames just a little bit easier than they were in Rebirth, but they are beatable. It is something you can do. Now, gameplay-wise, combat stuff, I almost want them to make it harder. It's kind of crazy to say because there are some hard fights in the game, especially like the VR stuff, of course. There's some hard fights in the story mode. I think I got stuck on the Rufus fight for like an hour for some reason, where you fight him in like Gold Saucer. And then obviously the boss fight gauntlet at the end of the game is just stupid on hard difficulty if you're not perfectly prepared for it. She wasn't prepared for whenever I did the fight at the end of the game. I was following a guide on how to set up your characters and how to tell who is going to appear at where throughout all the fucking fights you do at the end of the game, right? There's a way to like build your characters to make sure they're prepared for each and every stage and whatever, right? And like, I think I kept dying to like the first fight with like Sephiroth and like Cloud and Zack, and it would reset you back to like the Genova fight, right? And I think I eventually just gave up because I kept having to respec my characters every single time. And it took me like 10, 15 minutes to like do what I had to do for each and every character for every stage of the fight. So I eventually like forgot to do it, and I eventually did beat Sephiroth. And when we started going through all the different stages of like the Bizarro Sephiroth fight, and obviously Sephiroth versus like Cloud and Aerith at the end, like my characters had nothing they were supposed to have. And going into the Sephiroth fight at the end of the game, I really only had Cloud, and my Aerith only had like one materia. And it was like, I don't even know, assess materia or something random. She had no goddamn abilities at all. She had nothing on her. And I was still able to beat it. And that's kind of my point where I talk about wanting to maybe have the game just to be a little bit harder because outside of Cloud being the only character that was actually built to do the boss fight gauntlet at the end, every single other character, all of them were ill-prepared. Didn't have even all material on them, had the wrong accessories, the wrong armors, maybe even the wrong weapons. Like nobody was built correctly for that boss fight gauntlet at the end. And I was able to beat it. And I don't even think I'm that good at these kinds of games. There is a part of me that wants them to make Part 3's hard mode even harder. So yeah, that was just the first interview with Ntower, but it's probably the best one. I think most of that article is worth reading. We skipped over a few things here and there, of course, where they just talk about like Switch 2 stuff. Not necessarily important. It's not what we're here for. I don't know what all's worth talking about in the other interviews. I just know that there is some stuff, so we'll just hop into those, I guess. So here we're looking at the Cloud Dosage interview. They say, when revisiting Final Fantasy VII, Hamaguchi said the team's goal wasn't to change everything. Instead, they wanted to respect the original while reworking the parts that couldn't be fully expressed with the technology of 1997. With Switch 2's capabilities, they finally had the tools to show those moments as they had originally envisioned them. He described the remake series as a chance to rebuild, not rewrite, what Final Fantasy VII meant to fans. The goal was never to discard the original's emotional core narrative beats. Instead, the team focused on enhancing moments that are limited by older hardware. For example, environments like Midgar can now be fully realized thanks to the Switch 2's improved specs, which allowed the team to present key scenes in greater detail and at full performance. Hamaguchi made it clear that this version of Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't just about technical improvements, it's also about preserving the impact of the story. He wants longtime fans to feel the same excitement and surprise they did in 1997 and hopes new players can experience that feeling for the first time. I do want to say this article is a little bit weird because they're mostly talking about the Switch 2 stuff through a lot of the question and answers or whatever, and what the recapping that Hamaguchi said. But they're giving props to the Switch 2 for stuff that they've done with like Midgar and for Remake, but it's like that has nothing to do with anything. For one, the game was initially made for PS4 with the original version. Intergrade was made on the PS5. Like Switch 2 had nothing to do with what like the current version of Remake is. I don't know why they're like saying, well, with the Switch 2's hardware we can do this. And it's like, no, not at all. Anyways, I believe this is a quote that a lot of people were talking about over the last day or so. Like Hamaguchi talking about not wanting to change the story or change the aspects of the original game. There's one to rework things they couldn't really express with the original version back in 1997. Also, he said it's a chance to rebuild the game, not rewrite the game. They want to stick to the emotional core, the narrative beats of the original FF7, like all these things that they've kind of been saying for a long time that lean in favor of it not being a sequel. Can't really alter the FF7 story too much or you get away from the emotional core, right? People want Aerith to be alive. And not alive in a different world. They want her to be alive in the third game. To not die this time around when it comes to the FF7 story. And that misses one of the biggest emotional cores when it comes to FF7. Kind of the same thing with Zack, right? I've been in that camp before of wanting Zack to be alive. And I'm not even totally against that. Part of me wouldn't even hate if like Aerith lived and Zack lived and so on and so forth. Happy ending. Everything's sunshine and rainbows, right? But that undermines what is an important part and aspect of the original FF7. And part of that is death. It's also a celebration of life. Life is an important part of the FF7 story too. But so is death. And so far with like the remake games, death hasn't been a major thing. Like we need death to be a very real and permanent thing when it comes to FF7. Even if you can live on in the live stream, that's fine. But like in the real world where our characters are, we need death to be a thing. And so far it's just been Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. And they, obviously, at the end of Remake, seem to be teasing that Biggs was alive. Obviously, they're doing the otherworld shit. But we're at least having that conversation of, oh shit, maybe Biggs didn't die. Oh shit, maybe Zack didn't die this time. And that does undermine what is an important aspect of the FF7 story. I'm absolutely ecstatic that Zack is a part of the FF7 story a lot. When it comes to like the ending of Remake and a lot through Rebirth, we get to control Zack and see what he's doing. I love that shit, and I want more of that in the next game. But we don't need them to be alive for them to be a part of the story or to have an impact on like the story or help us defeat the big bad evil. We've seen Zack doing his world hopping shit, but still got to solo Bizarro Sephiroth. That's why, because Zack is the GOAT, and I'm hoping in the next game we get more of that shit, but also like maybe him and Aerith. That's what I want, because Aerith is dead. You gotta accept that shit. She might be alive in these other worlds, but she fucking died for sure, confirmed 100%. And I would love to see those two team up. Like, 'cause that's the shit I want, where Zack and Aerith finally reunite. They are dead, but they're in the live stream. They're not fully joined up to the live stream. They can help from beyond the grave type shit, right? But them getting their reunion after however many years and helping us defeat Sephiroth from inside the planet. Like, that's the good shit. I want that directly in my veins, man. Give me more of that shit. We literally see that shit in the very first game. At the end of the game, Aerith helps the live stream and Holy defeat Meteor. It's there from the very fucking beginning. If you don't think that's what we're seeing in Remake, I don't know what to tell you. Here we have the Nintendo Everything interview. They say, you've described Remake as a rebuild, not a rewrite. How has that philosophy guided your approach to iconic story scenes? The core themes of Final Fantasy VII, life, legacy, humanity, remain unchanged, but it has been decades since the original release. Cultures, technology, and even players' perspectives have changed. We considered all that carefully. Part 3 is progressing well, and I think it'll be very exciting and satisfying for longtime fans. We've also announced that Part 2 is on its way to Switch 2. Again, the core themes of the game and the story have not been changed when it comes to the remake story versus the original FF7, and they're just reimagining it, not rewriting it, for a modern audience. Looking back at the 1997 game now through the lens of Remake and Rebirth, how has your perspective on Final Fantasy VII changed? Playing the original as a fan and now being able to revisit it as a developer has been a profound experience. It's deepened my respect for the story and characters. With Part 3, I hope to deliver something that both honors that legacy and surprises players. And look, I don't want to keep harping on this, repeat myself, because it ultimately doesn't matter. People are going to have their thoughts and beliefs on what they think's happening with the story, and it's going to remain unchanged until we get to the third game. But you can't honor the legacy of FF7 if things are drastically different in terms of like actual character fates. Characters that should be dead being alive, characters maybe that should be alive, they're now dead, whatever. And I don't mean alive in a different world. I'm talking alive in the real world where our characters are, Beagle world or whatever, right? The sequel discussion's a little bit different. That can still undermine the original FF7 in certain ways. But most of the time I'm talking about character fates here when we're talking about honoring the legacy. Like, Aerith dying is one of the most impactful gaming moments of literally all time. Maybe the most important character death of all time. So if she were to live this time around in the third game or something, that undermines the legacy of FF7. So here we have the Square Enix article they put out today. They say, hello, Hamaguchi-san, can you first introduce Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade for any players yet to experience it? Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is the first part of the trilogy that remakes Final Fantasy VII, a game that has been loved across the world for around 30 years, with modern technology and creative sensibilities. That said, it's not just a simple remake of the game, but also a bold attempt to reimagine the story, characters, and world of Final Fantasy VII in a form that's suitable for the modern age while still showing great respect to the original. The sentiment behind the game was to make it a story that transcends time, by depicting the struggles and choices of Final Fantasy VII's iconic characters like Cloud and Sephiroth, with more depth and vividness than ever before. We aim to deliver an experience that resonates with complete newcomers and long-term Final Fantasy VII fans alike. The Intergrade version of the game sees upgrades to the graphics and controls. It also adds a new story star, Yuffie Kisaragi, that shines a light on a different part of the world away from Cloud and his comrades. The experience fills in some of the blanks in the FF7 storyline to make the overall narrative of the trilogy even richer, and is an important link into the next part of the series. The first bit we read, we kind of talked about that a lot through this video, so we're just kind of move on to the second half that we read. Mostly the ending part, where they talk about the Yuffie DLC, kind of link into the next game. It's kind of nice for them to finally start talking about that to some degree, alluding to the Wutai stuff. I'm very much looking forward to what they do with that location, how they're going to implement that location into the story, the follow-up on like the Sonon, possibly also Nero shit in the next game. They kind of teased the Nero stuff a little bit in Rebirth, right? With like her trial and her being scared of the purple shit when they see Sephiroth. So I do wonder how they're going to follow that up. If we're going to see Sonon again, we're going to fight Sonon, what's going to happen there? Part of me does also want to make a joke about the transcends time quote, because I just know there's going to be a portion of people that are going to look at that very literally, as in this is a story that transcends time. There's time travel, different timelines or whatever. As opposed to it just being like a metaphorical description of the FF7 story with this time around, this version of it transcending time, being a timeless story. The first entry in the story, Final Fantasy VII Remake, is set in the closed environment of Midgard, introduces the main character Cloud and his allies, and the start of their journey. The second game, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, expands the world massively and focuses on the relationships between Cloud and the other characters. These bonds deepen as their feelings collide and intertwine. For the third and final part, which is currently in development, we are working to bring all the stories told so far together for an epic culmination that will leave a lasting impression on players. That's definitely going to happen. It just depends on how the game does actually end, the third game, right? Because there's a lot of people that are expecting a lot of different things. All kinds of people have different expectations from the third game, from what they think is happening with the story. So I think no matter what they do, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be disappointed. Because if it is a sequel of some sort, so they change things drastically, that's going to piss off a large part of the audience. If it's just kind of FF7 again, reimagined, it's going to piss off a lot of people. So on and so forth, right? There's kind of no winning with what they've done so far with the remake games. Luckily for me as a fan, I'm kind of in the middle where I have my thoughts and expectations what I think they're going to do. But I'm also open to the new shit if they go that route, if they go this like insane direction with the story for whatever reason. I'm not going to hate it. I might have thoughts and opinions on it depending on what they do. But I'm open to that possibility, right? I'm not gonna be mad one way or the other, really. So there's a section where they talk about the streamlined progression coming to the Xbox and Switch version of Remake or whatever, and bring that to other platforms, PS5, PC. We don't need to talk about that because we've read that before, but there's this part that I thought was interesting where they say, we're currently working on bringing the lighting optimizations from the PC version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth to the PS5 version at the moment. Have a good idea when this can be implemented by. Fans who played on PS5 can look forward to these further improvements in the future. Yeah, Hamaguchi confirms that we're going to get another update at some point for the PS5 version of Rebirth to bring in like the lighting features from PC, which is nice. So we're getting at least like maybe 2 updates because we're going to get the streamlined progression at some point eventually, right? And then we're also getting this like lighting update. It's been a while, I feel like, since we last got like an actual game update for Rebirth. I don't even know when the last time was without looking it up. It's starting to creep up on Rebirth being 2 years old, but it would be nice if we got an update that would actually fix the lighting because obviously it's horrendous in some locations. And they conclude the interview with, finally, what are you most excited for new players to discover about Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade? For people who don't know the original Final Fantasy VII, I believe this will be an opportunity for them to find why it's been such a well-loved title for so long. In some ways, being able to experience this game that has stayed in so many people's memories, reimagined using the latest technology and new creative sensibilities, is an opportunity to discover a classic. On the other side of things, I want fans who did play the original to see how the Final Fantasy VII that they remember has been reimagined. It's more than just nostalgia, and I'm certain that your previous understanding of the game and its story will change when you use some of the new perspectives and details. I hope that all players can enjoy encountering a new Final Fantasy VII regardless of their perspectives. So again, we've been saying it all video, but Hamaguchi says that if you've never played FF7, then the remake trilogy is going to show you why the original is such a beloved classic. So again, can't really deviate too far from the story in that regard. And then if you're somebody that has played the original FF7, they're giving you a reimagined version of the story, showing you like new interpretations of stuff. He straight up says in this part of the interview and some of the previous ones we looked at today, reimagined. He said that so many times. How many times have we said that? That's what this is. The FF7 story reimagined. With how much Hamaguchi's using that word here lately, I'm starting to think that that maybe is the third game's title. Final Fantasy VII Reimagined. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, but maybe it'll get the point across. Dudes, that is going to be pretty much the video. It's a long-ass video. A lot of interviews out there. We actually ended up skipping over one of them. The Nintendo Everything interview or something like that. Just didn't really have anything worth talking about. Also link in the description below if people want to read it or whatever, but a lot of interviews lately, man. We're looking at around about 10 interviews in the last like handful of days, which is kind of insane. And a lot of it does kind of touch on Part 3 stuff a little bit. Obviously nothing too major yet, but a lot of like talk of Part 3 and news in the not too distant future. So like, they're definitely like kind of ramping up the Part 3 stuff slowly but surely. And we are totally here for it. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so it's in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.